Hi there, Rob Elliott here, doing the video portion of the assignment for 2C Old Testament Literature, Former Prophets. The assignment asks me to explain why the Jewish arrangement of the canon of Scripture places these particular books, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, why it places these particular books in the category of prophecy rather than placing them as mere historical facts. So the decision by the authors, compilers, editors of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, they place these books in the realm of prophecy rather than history because of the prophetic activity that takes place in these books. And I think we have to be somewhat careful in defining that term prophet or prophetic when it comes to the Hebrew Scriptures. In our own time, we tend to define prophet as someone who successfully predicts the future. That's not necessarily what it means in the Hebrew Scriptures. In the Hebrew Bible, the term prophet or prophetic often connotes someone who can help ensure the fulfillment of the promises or the judgments of God from past generations, seeing things through that God said in the past, ensuring that those take place in the present time. So using that definition, someone who can ensure the fulfillment of the promises or judgments of God, we can classify books like Joshua as a prophetic book. Joshua was Moses' divinely appointed successor. Joshua fills that role. He hears from God in similar ways to Moses. He experiences God in similar ways to Moses. So, for instance, when he's in the presence of God, he too takes off his footwear. He saw through a number of the promises that God made to Moses. Joshua ended up being the one who saw them through. So although the promise was not made to Joshua, he was the individual that helped ensure that people realized that God did in fact deliver. The big one would be the possession of the promised land, something promised to Moses that comes to pass under Joshua. So the Judges were also like prophets. Again, not the predict the future type prophet we so often think of, but seeing things through to their end type prophets. In their case, their prophetic action was to ensure that Israel successfully navigated a series of cyclical crises, things that kept coming up over and over again. So their prophetic action was, under the influence of God's hand, to demonstrate to the people that God would deliver them from harm when they called on him. Deliverance is one of those long-standing prophetic promises of God in the Hebrew Scriptures, and the Judges were the agents of delivering on that promise on a number of occasions. They were like God's champions in that they demonstrated God's faithfulness to the people. Samuel was the last of the Judges. He was a significant prophet. He spoke truth to Saul, and that was a dangerous occupation of many prophets in what we call the Old Testament. They spoke truth to power. They spoke truth to people that could do them great harm, and Samuel certainly did that in his role as a prophet to Saul. So he spoke truth to power. Also, he helped usher in the age of the monarchy through being present during the reign of King David. Later on in Samuel, we will meet Nathan, who is a prophet of David. First and Second Kings, originally a single volume, First and Second Kings have a significant prophetic presence in them. We learn about Nathan, a significant prophet we just mentioned. We learn about prophets like Ahijah, like Jehu, like Micaiah, Isaiah, Huldah, Elijah, and Elisha, who are certainly big-time characters in the narrative. We also learn about several unnamed prophets who are not identified specifically, but we know they exist. There's a real prophetic culture in these books. The prophets in these books that we've discussed, they not only saw through the promises of God, ensuring that certain things that had been promised in past ages would come to pass in their own time, but they also deal with seeing through several of the judgments that are threatened in earlier times. judgment that would be related to disobedience. These characters in their service as prophets get to demonstrate to the folks that God was not making empty threats. Let me read really quickly from the Longman and Dillard text, page 149. It addresses this about 2/3 of the way down. The prophets, as Moses' successors, Deuteronomy 18, continued to record the history of Israel from the point where Deuteronomy ended, in Deuteronomy 1-4 and 34. They demonstrated the historical realization of Moses' prophetic curses on a disobedient nation, Deuteronomy 28. So, we see that not only these prophets see through into reality things that had long ago been promised, we also see that they help contextualize the judgment that the people are experiencing. That things God said would happen if the people were disobedient, these prophets in Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, these prophets help explain to the people that God wasn't messing around when he said these things would come if disobedience was present among Israel. Thanks very much.